Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with a Ryder Cup preview, both for tomorrow's action and the golf tournament as a whole on the DFS angle. We'll go through what you need to know before building those DFS lineups to go out there and have yourself a week. We'll go through some of the pairings which we got today, some of just the general strategy involved with the week like this, and how, depending on the contest that you're entering, that you should attack that given contest. Because if you're in a cash contest, smaller field GPP, as opposed to, one of those larger field contests, like the big $20, for example, you're going to have to attack them a little bit differently this week. So we'll go through all of that for you. If you have any prop questions, just, bets, questions in general about the event, well, that's what this time is for. So first off, welcome on in, everybody. And let's get right on after this thing. So first off, we got Mark down there in chat. What's going on? Hopefully you're having a solid Wednesday evening. And I think a great place to start here is going to be with those pairings, right? Taking a look at the information that we got today, which is really shaping the slate as a whole. So if you don't know, right, the Ryder Cup, a team format between Europe and the USA, that we get a lot of information for the night before the event, right? So they're going to play different types of formats over the next 2 days, right? I'm not going to do this whole rendition again. You've probably seen the breakdown of the Ryder Cup like 4 times this week. The important part is, right, are these pairings and the implications of them. We knew players like Scotty Scheffler, Sam Burns were likely going to be paired together. Now we know for certain, right, that they were going to be a pairing, right? Same thing with Jon Rahm, Tyrrell Hatton. Ludwig and Victor, we speculated might be together. Same thing with Lowry, Sepp, so on and so forth. Really, none of these combinations, right, are a surprise to us. In fact, in the video there Monday, Tuesday, right, came out a little bit later this week. All of these pairings were what we were expecting. The real, new piece of information that we got, right, was knowing that they're going to be together and knowing that they're going to play the first slate together. In a few pairings that I want to point out that I think are going to be really pivotal this year, are this first off, this Max Homa, Brian Harman one, and this Ricky Fowler, Colin Morikawa pairing. Both of these pairings weren't expected to play in foursomes. We knew that they were likely going to be paired together, but we didn't know they were actually going to play in the first session out. So now that we have that information, we know that clearly they're in the game plan for the USA. And rather than projecting for maybe 3 starts over the 5 sessions, I've bumped them up to 3.5, 4 starts apiece. So same thing with Ricky, Colin Morikawa down there, right? I've gone from like a 3-session projection up to like 3.5, 4 different starts over the next 2 or 3 days. So a lot of this information is going to change your projections. It's going to change your average score. And of course your ceiling, right? Because you can't play all 5 slates, or you have less of a chance, right, to play 4 or even 3 slates if you don't play this first session out. So obviously all the players that are going out tomorrow, so all 16 of them, their projections got bumped up in my modeling and whatnot, but even more so when it comes to the ownership angle, right? Don't act like you're the only one with this information. Everyone out there is going to adjust their modeling, adjust their player pool to really prioritize these 16 players, and especially the super groups, right? Like a Victor Hovland, Aberg. They're going to be the most popular group this week. I can tell you that definitively. They'll get some of the most ownership there. Jon Rahm, Tyrrell Hatton, right? Love that group. I'm going to have plenty of exposure myself. Also, probably going to be the most popular group this week. Same thing with Xander Cantlay, right? They're going to be up there in terms of ownership. Just know that you're not the only one that's going to play it this way. So you want to make sure that you're focusing on the guys that are actually playing, right? These 16 are going to have a huge advantage over the rest of the field, but we also want to consider correlation, right? I talked about it on our early preview about trying to pair these players together and specifically pairing a captain, right? Whoever you're using at that 1.5x spot with his partner at the flex spot. And here's the idea with that, right? This week, especially in larger field GPPs, and that's going to be a majority of our focus here in the live stream, guys. If you have cash questions, smaller field stuff, of course, feel free to ask at any point. But in larger field GPPs, you're going to have the nuts at the captain spot, right? You're going to have the guy that scores 4, 4.5, potentially even 5 points over the 5 sessions this week. And the only guys that can do that are, first off, players that are playing in the first session tomorrow. But furthermore, players that are going to get hot early, right? To capture 4 or 5 points, you've got to go out there and probably win on early Friday morning, right? You got to go out there and win your foursomes matchup. So if I'm going to take a Xander Schauffele, who I'll just say I'm not playing at captain, but let's say that I was, I'd 100% have Patrick Cantlay in that lineup. If I wanted to play Tyrrell Hatton at captain, right? Well, I'm almost certainly going to want to play John Rahm in that kind of lineup. Just know that when you have so much correlation available, or just we know that there's going to be guys that are tied together in terms of their score, you want to take advantage of doing that, right? There's no penalty to playing these two players together. Of course, right, John Rahm's pretty expensive, right? So to take him on top of Tyrrell Hatton does come with a cost in terms of salary. But in terms of projection, right, you're getting free ceiling for essentially nothing out there. Whereas, let's say Tyrrell Hatton, if you were going to pair him up with like Max Homa for some God forbid reason out there, there's no correlation to speak of, right? You could play all Euros if you want to this week. That's another angle that I haven't heard a ton of people talking about. You don't really have to play somebody from each team, right? It's not like an NFL showdown slate where you have to play somebody from both like the Packers and the Lions tonight. And if you want to just go like 5-1, 4-2, you can go in that direction too. If you're going to play a 4-2, I don't think it has to be 2 pairings for the one team and then 1 solo pairing for the other. There are a bunch of different ways that you can construct lineups out there. The important part is that you are using correlation, right? And you're trying to take guys that aren't playing each other tomorrow morning. Now, if you have a set of 150 lineups, right, you might have to play a few lineups that have guys playing there against each other on Friday morning. But like if you're only playing 2-3 lineups or like just a handful of lineups that you're hand building, there's no reason for you to have that negative correlation in your lineup, right? So it's not just taking guys that are playing together, but ideally, right, we know one of the sessions now taking guys that aren't playing each other in one of those sessions, and you're inevitably going to have some kind of overlap, right? I mean, that's just going to happen right over the 3-day period, especially when it comes to singles and that kind of stuff. So there is some level of luck involved, right? And people are like, oh, it's all about skill out there, right? God forbid there's a little bit of luck involved when you're playing DFS. There's definitely a little bit to that there, right? You got to hope that your guys aren't playing each other. You have to ham and egg a little bit out there on a week like this. So just set yourself up for success, right? Don't be going into Friday, the first session, having guys playing each other, right? Like you're already behind the 8 ball, right? Whereas you're hoping that you're, behind the 8 ball, like Saturday morning, right? It's like, oh shit, my guys are playing each other early there Saturday morning. That's okay, right? You don't want to be going into it knowing that you're behind the 8 ball, right? That's why I'm so adamant about not taking guys playing each other unless you're playing just a metric fuck ton of lineups and you can afford to do something like that. Let's hop over to the projections. We're mostly going to look at ownership, which there are definitely a few things to point out. Not many people seem to be doing ownership this week. So I think there could be an edge to that, right? Having somebody's projections that you trust when it comes to that. And this is by no means perfect, right? I tell you guys, right? My algorithm this week is completely different, right? Than what I'm using for a stroke play event. Just much less players to choose from. On top of that, I'm trying to correlate players when it comes to their ownership. It was just much harder to accomplish this week, right? But I went out there, put my best foot forward, spent a lot of time putting together these numbers. These, of course, are on my Patreon page, but we're going to use them for the sake of the live stream here too. So the player pool's blacked out. We're not going to talk about a lot of my exposure. If you want to see that, check out my Patreon. It's on there. We're more so going to look at the ownership and talk about some of the game theory, right? Talk about players that are getting steamed up, players that you could take at low ownership, and probably even more so going to focus on lineup construction, how you're actually putting together these lineups. So if you have questions about any specific players, you want to know my takes on them, I guess go ahead and throw it down in chat. But it's not really the slate for that, right? It's more so a slate about how you're going to put together your lineups, right? At least to me, that's the much more important portion when it comes to this kind of slate. So the first thing to focus on here is the ownership distribution. So when we're taking a look at this, you can see the guys that aren't playing tomorrow are essentially unowned. And it's not like they have 0% across the board, but it's 0.2% for Brooks at captain, right? 4% at flex. Jordan Spieth, Matt Fitzpatrick, JT, right? A lot of these guys down here that are essentially unowned that at first glance, right, if we were playing a normal stroke play event, right, you'd go, these are great pivots, right? Guys who can mix into a lineup and instantly get different. That is certainly the case, but you don't want to go crazy with these kind of players, right? This isn't like a stroke play event where we have all of that variance, right? We have a cut line to work with. We have 156 players, right? And we're only choosing 6. There are 24 players this week. There's really only 16 that are extremely relevant, right? When it comes to ceiling performances. And you're choosing 6, right? So it's 6 choose 16, or 16 choose 6. There's a countable amount of, combinations that we have to work with here. So rather than it being all about variance, all about game theory, right? It's not really that kind of slate, right? Especially if you're like in a cash or a smaller field GPP. If you're in those kind of contests, first off, you're not really worrying about duplicating as much, right? If you're a smaller field GPP, you're playing against like 100 or 200 other people, right? Duplicating yourself is going to be really hard to come by. So I don't even know if you want to worry about that all that much. And furthermore, leverage is the same thing, right? You're only playing against a couple hundred other people. I don't want to say that ownership is like you can't ignore it or it looks like completely negligible when you're playing in some of those contests, but it kind of is in this kind of week. It's that kind of slate where ownership is something that you can almost throw completely out the window. So if you're playing in one of those contests, just know that that's probably my take on this kind of week. If you're in a large field GPP, it's a completely different scenario. So let's talk about that. When you're in a large field GPP and you're playing against, let's say 20,000, sometimes even more entries, depending on which contest that you're entering, then all of that matters, right? Ownership matters, and especially that duplication of going out there, making sure you're not splitting first place with like 20, 30 other people. When there's only 16 or maybe like 20 players that you really should be using in your lineups this week, and you're choosing 6 of them for a lineup, you could be duplicating yourself with hundreds or even thousands of people in GPPs. And if you're going to go out there and try and take home a contest that is that top heavy, right, that has a 20, 25% rake, you cannot be duplicating yourself, right? If you're going to play in those kind of contests this week, you first off have the mindset of like, okay, I'm not going to play all the chalk. You also have to have the mindset of like, you're going to playing negative EV lineups, right? You're going to have to play lineups with guys that aren't even playing in the first session, right? Like a Brooks. If you're running like Sims and all that and looking at ownership, all of that for this slate, like it's going to tell you to play like all the Brooks, right? If you're playing in the large field GPP, it's going to tell you to play all the Jordan Spieth, all the Justin Thomas out there. And, if you're in a single entry, those kind of contests, those players are just unnecessary, right? They're unnecessary risks that you don't have to get to. But if you're playing in that large field GPP, you want to play those kind of guys, right? Like it's completely dependent on the contest that you're entering. Majority of my exposure is going to be single entries. It's going to be smaller field stuff. I'm not doing a ton of GPPs this week. I am going to have 50 GPP lineups that I'm entering. So those are going to look a little bit different than what I have for some of the, smaller field stuff that I'm entering, the higher dollar stuff that I'm entering for this kind of week. But it's all dependent on the contest that you're entering, all your strategy, right? And a few other ways that you could differentiate, right? You could toss in a few of these really low owned options, right? All the guys that pretty much aren't starting tomorrow. You could leave some salary on the table, right? You could go down here, maybe take like an Aberg at captain, Burns, Lowry, right? One of these guys that's starting out there tomorrow morning. And if you start with like a $5,000 player at captain, right? You're only spending like $8,000 at that spot. You physically can't spend all of your salary. Like even if you wanted to, you can't spend all your salary, right? With your other, 5 spots in the lineup, right? If you'd have to take the top 5 to max out your salary, right? If you're not taking those top 5 players, you can literally take whoever you want to out there. So it's there are ways to differentiate, right? If you just take one of these captains that are a little bit cheaper and then maybe even leave like $3,000-$4,000 on the table, that's a real easy way to get different out there. This isn't the kind of slate that you can leave $200 on the table and get different, right? It's a completely different scenario. This isn't really even the slate that you can leave $500 on the table and get different. I think you need to take it a little bit further than you would for, let's say, like the Tour Championship or a no-cut event, a showdown slate, right, for Saturday, Sunday. You want to take differentiation a little bit more seriously, or at least in the large field GPPs, right? If you're in single entry, the smaller field stuff, I'm not telling you to go and play the chalkiest 6 players by any means, right? That's not the thought process here. The thought process is, though, if you have like 3-4 chalky guys in a single entry, that's probably okay this week. You might duplicate yourself with like 1-2 people in some of the larger single entries. So let's say like a single entry with like a couple thousand entries, you might duplicate yourself once or twice, but that's not a problem in those contests, right? It's not a top heavy GPP there. So it's just, it's all dependent on the contest that you're entering. And in terms of player pool, guys, I don't want to say it's a wash this week, but just you've tacked the correlation more than anything. There's not really going to be any hot takes that win or lose you this golf tournament. Anointed said, so it's 4 sums in best ball, then individual. So there's 3 rounds. I don't know if it's best to like say that it's 3 rounds. It's 3 days, right? So the first 2 days, you're going to have 4 sums and 4 balls. And then the last round, I guess, would be there on Sunday. It's singles. Heard today that the Hobbit has been the best ball striker. Yeah, if he's the best ball striker on Team USA, they're in for a little bit of trouble this weekend. That's for damn sure. I think I heard that from a few guys on the live from broadcast. We're saying that he's going to be a key part of the team and whatnot. Him and Homa, right, are going to be a key part of the team. I don't know if that's a good sign for them. It's 2 Ryder Cup rookies that haven't shown anything out there before. If they go out there, all of the groups that, are signed there Monday, go out there and get their job done. It's a 3-1 or a 4-0 for the US. I'll shut up real quick. But honestly, based on matchups, let's just go back to that sheet over there, guys. I'll give you my, I guess, opinions of what I think happens. I don't think it's going to go well for Team USA, to be quite frank with you. I don't think it's going to be a positive slate for the US side. So first off, this top matchup of Rahm Hatton versus Scotty Burns, I really like the Rahm Hatton side. I think they win that matchup. First off, Scotty Scheffler is a liability with the putter, and Sam Burns is one of the worst players in this event. So, he's not worse than like the Strakas of the world, the Hogards, the McIntyres by any means, but he's down there with that bunch when it comes to talent level. I mean, I'm a huge Sam Burns guy, right? I bet him all the time out there on tour, but in terms of median performance, he's not on the same level as everyone else in this matchup, right? The Rahm, Hatton, and Scotty Schefflers. In my opinion, they're much better players, much more consistent players. And on one side, you have 2 of those kind of guys versus a team that really has one. And like I said, a good player that's a huge liability with the putter. So even when Burns plays well, I wonder if Scotty Scheffler is going to pay it off with the birdie putts, right? So I definitely like the Rahm Hatton side there. This next matchup with Homa, Brian Harman, I personally think that Victor Hovland Aberg steamrolled them. So we'll have to see what happens there. And again, I'm a US fan, guys. I'm just trying to give you my unbiased takes here. I think that this isn't even going to be close because first off, Max Homa is going to have to hit like hybrids, freaking woods from where Brian Harman's hitting his tee shots to, and vice versa, right? You're going to have a lot of wedges for Brian Harman. I think that's pretty sweet. I think if they're on script on the holes where Max Homa's teeing off, I think it could go pretty well because Max Homa's a pretty decent putter. So obviously he's going to pay off quite a few of those birdie putts, but that's only half the holes, right? And on the other side, you've got Hovland and Aberg that are just absolute cyborgs. Like I can't see that one going that well for the US either. This third matchup, I do have Ricky and Colin winning, but it's kind of like the matchup of the 2 worst groups. In fact, if I was going to pick the 2 worst teams out of these 8, it would be these 2. So it could go either way, frankly. And then this last matchup, it's both teams' number 1s, in my opinion, right? Rory, Tommy Fleetwood are the best matchup, the best pairing that the European side has. Same thing with Xander and Cantlay. We'll have to see. That'll be a fun one. Honestly, I'd say that one's more of like a toss-up. I probably couldn't pick a winner out of those 2. But the way that I have it here, right, is I've got it like 2-1-1 at this point. So I've got 2.5 points going to Europe, 1.5 going to the USA. So it's not like they're going to get trounced out there, but it's not a great start. Let's just say that much. So let's see how it plays out. Maybe Zach Johnson pulls off a 4-0. That would completely change my tune out there when it comes for what to expect this week. But yeah, especially like these first 2 matchups, I don't know. I really like the European side on these top 2 matchups. The last 2, I think, are going to be really competitive, but those top 2, kind of worry about that one a little bit. Let's talk about a little bit of lineup construction. Like I said, we're not going to talk that much about player pool. There's only 24 players. There's only 16 playing on the first session. If you're playing anything more than 20 lineups, you should probably have all 16 guys in the first session in your pool. Maybe you fade a few of them just because you have to, right? Just for the sake of, how you're putting together your lineups. But there's not that much to say there, right? It's more so about how you're putting the lineups together. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's see. Any questions before we do so? Do I like Haddon as a captain? I do, yeah. So if you're going to play Haddon at captain, you definitely want Rahm at the flex spot. For a single entry, should you be thinking 2 pairs or all pairs from the early tee times? You should either do all pairs, James, or you should do like 2 pairs. I think having 4 of your roster spots allocated towards stacks makes a lot of sense. That last 2, right, the last pairing, I think would be optional. It kind of depends on what you want to attack. Maybe you take 1 player from different pairings, right, to fill those last 2. I would probably stick, at least in like a single entry, right? So this is for a single entry for you, James. It would probably stick to the guys playing, tomorrow morning, right? Those 16 players. But you don't have to have 3 pairings there necessarily, right? It could be the 2 pairings and then 2 guys by themselves. You may have already missed it, so you apologize. It's okay if you have. Can you play both players from the same team? So Homa and Harman? Absolutely, Jared. And you should be doing that as much as humanly possible. That's correlation that we can add to our lineups, right? Just an added way for us to get ourselves to the optimal lineup a little bit easier. My opinion, Jared, anyone that you're playing at captain, you 100,000% should be playing whoever they're matched up with. And I would only play guys at captain that are playing in that first session tomorrow, right? We need a guy to score like 4 or 5 points to go out there and get to the optimal captain. So you need them to play tomorrow morning. So yeah, play somebody from tomorrow's session at captain and make sure you play their partner with them. That would be like a steadfast rule to work with. Outside of that, you can be creative, and I'd be okay with it. Like if you only wanted to play that 1 pairing and then take 4 wild cards, I wouldn't do that, but you could do that, and I would be like okay with it. Jeremy Roush down here. Oh my gosh. Let's just ban that kid. That guy is a weirdo. He was texting me. He's not supposed to be. All right. Let's go through this lineup construction stuff here. If you have any questions, go ahead and throw it down here. But I think we're going to touch on a lot of those questions right now. So first and foremost, if you're going to pick your captain, right, it has to be somebody going off early tomorrow. So Brooks Koepka, Spieth, Justin Thomas, sorry, it's probably not going to happen. They could go out there, start from session 2, right, go out there, win 3 matches. It might not be the optimal captain, right? Like somebody's likely to get 3.5+ points, probably at least 4 points for somebody out there this week. That's who you're going to have at the captain spot, right? And unless Jordan Spieth is absolutely flawless after the first session, right, goes like 4-0 from the second session on, it's not likely for that sort of player to make it into the optimal captain spot. So start with that, right? Let's go ahead and just pick somebody here that makes sense. I know we had a few questions about Tyrrell Hatton, so let's go ahead and throw him in there. Of course, you'd want to match him up with Jon Rahm. That puts us at about $7,000 remaining per player. So as long as we're taking 1 value tier option, it really takes care of the rest of the lineup for us, right? So if we wanted to go down here, let's really make it a value option. Let's throw Straka in there, and let's throw Lowry in there. So this is going to be like a real cheap option. This is where you can get a little bit different, right? So we had a question on whether you had to have a 3rd pairing in there to round out your lineup. This is where I think you can, spruce it up a little bit, right? So you could go 6-0 European stack, right? We could throw like Rory in there, round it off with a Hovland. I'd be perfectly fine with that kind of lineup in like a single entry, smaller field contest. Or, right, we could take like a Scheffler and a Rory, right? Take 1 US guy, right? Make it like a 5-1 stack. All of those kind of lineups are live, right? I think that this is going to be a relatively close affair. I do think that Europe wins, but I don't think it's going to be an absolute runaway. So we'll leave it at that, right? I think that 5-1s, 6-0s, you could play, but 4-2s, even 3-3s are absolutely live as well. So when it comes to your lineup construction, think of it kind of like an NFL showdown slate. have a script in mind and build a lineup for that script. If you think it's going to be like an 18 to 10 victory out there for Europe, well, maybe you do play a 5-1 or a 6-0, right? If you think it's going to be 14-14 and an absolute stalemate tie out there, right? Maybe you play a 3-3, or maybe you think the US wins like 18 to 10, right? Then you go out there and you play like a 5-1 US stack or a 6-0 US stack. You could do that same kind of thing that you're doing for your NFL showdown lineups tonight. So we'll leave it at that. We'll build a few US stacks, right? If you wanted to start like a Cantlay at captain, right? Obviously play Xander Schauffele. If you wanted to go down here and take Scotty, right? You probably want to play Sam Burns with him. And let's make this a full US stack, right? Let's just assume this US goes out there and kills it, right? Including tomorrow morning. Well, you get throw Homa in there and round it off with a Brian Harman if you wanted to, right? That's leaving like $1,100 on the table. That kind of lineup would be more than fine for single entry, smaller field stuff. For GPPs, you're probably going to duplicate yourself, right? Even leaving that $1,100 on the table, just because, right? It's, you're filling another pair there, right? With throwing Harman in there, like a lot of people, right? Are obviously going to think about adding Harman to that as the final pairing. But in smaller field stuff, that's fine. Right? You could totally get away with that. And it's not going to impact your EV all that much. Let's see, any questions there? If you have time at the end, can I go over prize picks or underdog? Yeah, we'll take a look at it right now, Tyler. In fact, it's a pretty good time to do that now. So on prize picks, I can't bring it up here. Actually, let me see if I can. 1 second. I might be able to. For some reason, it doesn't work on my browser anymore. I think they may have like locked me from it, but I think I have a way around it. Yeah, we do. Okay, we'll use this. So yeah, in terms of the stuff on prize picks, they have a board up, but it's not great in terms of selection. I have one prop slip up on my Patreon page, but even to the guys there, I told them that I didn't think that much of it, that it was a 50-50 at the very best, because holes won and lost is a gimmick at the very best. It's not something that I would recommend betting on if you're trying to go out there and like grind out units, that sort of thing. I posted a little bit of analysis, right, based on some of the betting odds out there for two of the props that I liked, but they weren't like 65% hit rate props. I mean, we were talking about like 52% hit rates. I mean, it's like, why even bet it at that point, right? You're betting like a negative EV prop based on the odds that you're getting. So we'll leave it at that. If you want to see what I've been on prize picks, it's posted on my Patreon page, but I don't want to post that here. But we'll go over here for underdog, which I think is a little bit more interesting, are these unders on holes played. So I have the under on this Scheffler and Burns one, and this under on this Rory and Fleetwood one. A lot of the matches last year didn't go to the final hole. In fact, of the matches last year, I think it was like less than 20%. Ended up going all 18 holes. So these props here are extremely likely to push and have pretty decent equity to go under as well. So they have a few on here at like 16.5, right? I would probably even lean under on those for holes played. But what makes these two exceptional value is that you get the push right at 17, right? If they end up just playing the 17 holes, they don't have a reason to play 18. This would be a refund, right, on the 2-leg power play. So this is one of the other slips that I entered over there for underdog. I have a few that I did for total points that you could check out on there as well. But yeah, the one that we'll go over here for the live stream are these holes played props. They ended up being on the stream anyways. I didn't realize I had them on here. I did just post this slip before I went live, so I forgot to take them off. So that is the one slip that we'll go over for here. But yeah, the rest of them are on the Patreon page. It's to be frank with you, the Ryder Cup's a lot of fun to watch. It's a lot of fun to participate in, right? Root for the US side and whatnot. From the betting and DFS side, it's a little bit wacky. I don't want to call it a complete gimmick, but some people would call it that, okay, when it comes to the betting and the fantasy side. But I know there's a lot of hardcore golf fans out here that want the analysis. So that's what we're here with the live stream for. Let's see. First time Ryder Cup you're watching and so excited. Yeah, me too, man. That's the thing. Like, I have a few bets in. I have way less exposure money-wise this week than I typically would for a golf tournament. But who cares? I'm still going to be up at 1:30 a.m. watching the golf, enjoying it, whatnot. It's just it's bigger than betting. It's bigger than any other event that we have in the year, right? It means so much more. Is there a good way for you to look at the last Ryder Cup winning lineups? Yeah, there's a few people that tweeted out on Twitter X. If you want to take a look at that, Christian, just search GPP winning. Just search GPP and then the name of the golf tournament, and you could probably find it. I know Rick Ron Good tweets them out from time to time, and then other people do too, right? Normally, the people that are winning the GPPs will usually flex out there on Twitter. That's a good way to find them too. Outside of that, boys, I think that's it for this. I'm not going to hold us here too long, right? It's all about just making sure we know what we're doing here. Just a quick synopsis, right? If you're playing in DFS, just know what contest you're playing, right? If you're in a cash, single entry, that sort of thing, play whoever the heck you want, right? Use the correlation, right? Use that to your advantage. You can play 3 pairs if you want to. You can play 2 pairs and 2 wild cards. I think those are really good ways to go out there and attack those kind of lineups. And don't worry about the ownership and duplicating. It's just going to happen, okay? Like, you can try and be cute all you want. You can try and play these guys that aren't playing in the first session. You're playing at a huge disadvantage to the field if you're doing that. And really, you're not buying all that much, right? Like I said, it all depends on the contest you're entering, right? If we're looking at it through the smaller field stuff, it almost doesn't matter, right? When you're coming to a 200, 300 person contest. Now, if you're in the large field GPP, right, it's the complete opposite of that, right? You got to take it to the complete opposite extreme. So just, again, I know I've said this 20 times, but it's really all you need to know this week. Just cater your lineups to the contest that you're entering. And then for these props, just have fun with it. Like, if you want to take these overs or unders on holes lost and you have hot takes on the matches, then by all means, go out there and bet them, right? But if you're trying to bet them and grind out ROI, which that's the purpose of my Patreon, right? Is the post positive, plus EV plays, all that sort of fun stuff. It's not the best format for that. I'll leave it at that for the prop side. The DFS side, you can definitely run with that correlation and make some magic happen. Let's see. Any other last second questions? Betting format reminds you of the Dell match play? For sure. It's the exact same, Mark. I would say the amount of matches you play are different, right? It's not the same as Austin, where you could play 10, 12 matches by the end of the week, right? If you make it to the championship. So it's a little bit different from that angle, but yeah, scoring's the same, right? Betting is very similar for sure. Alrighty, guys, that's all we've got for the live stream. We got a little Thursday night football action tonight, which I'm not even sure if I'm going to stay up to watch the entire game because we got to get to sleep, wake up for that 1:30 a.m. start. And like I said, guys, as soon as they hit that first tee shot, I go from Team Europe to Team USA. It's my wallet is definitely going to be rooting for Team Europe, both from the outright and the DFS perspective. But my brain, my heart, everything else after that, I'll be everything for Team USA. So I'm probably not doing any live streams for rounds 2 through 4. Right, showdown for the Cup isn't really a thing, and like I said, the prop stuff is a little bit of a gimmick. We'll leave it at that. So it'll be a lot of football content this weekend. We'll be getting back into golf next week because we got the Sanderson Farm. So look forward to all of that, course breakdowns, DFS content, all that sort of fun stuff. But until then, guys, I appreciate the support on the channel. Smash that like button on the way out of here, and let's have ourselves a weekend.